What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Nick, Islam Makhachev said in a recent interview that he really is hoping for some fresh blood in his next title defense. He doesn't want another rematch with Charles Oliveira. He doesn't want the Arman Tsarukyan rematch, even though that one happened a little while ago. He wants Justin Gaethje. That really is who he thinks should be his next opponent. And obviously, there's a huge case to be made for Gaethje being the next title challenger.
Right.
He also mentioned timing because he has to take off for Ramadan, which is happening in April. So the latest that he could feasibly fight is March, and that's when he said he wants to fight. And so there's really two options in March that he could jump on the top of the bill for, and one would be the inaugural UFC Saudi Arabia, which is on March 2nd, the other would be UFC 299, which currently Sugar Sean and Chito Vera are headlining, but obviously if they made Makhachev versus Gaethje, that would probably be bumped to the co-main event. So what are your thoughts on the timing? What are your thoughts on Justin Gaethje being the opponent instead of Charles, and just in general what he said?
I love the matchup. I think Islam deserves a new opponent. And while there's a lot of people in the MMA world that definitely want to see Charles Oliveira get that title shot again, I just don't feel it. I don't think that has the same sort of aura or interest that a Justin Gaethje fight has. Islam Makhachev deserves some fresh blood. He deserves to see the top of the division move a little bit. And quite frankly, there's a lot of big names just all jam-packed at the top of 155. And it feels like once a year we get, one or two of those guys to fight. And then other than that, they're all sort of just waiting and ponying for their next shot at title or something like that. So rather than throwing Charles back in there, I mean, he did just prove to us last time that on a week or two's notice, he might back out, if something happens in the camp, which he's going to be training really hard for to try to beat Islam again. Of course, he could injure himself once again, and then you got to find a last-second replacement. I don't think that was fair for Volkanovski, and if they tried to bring Justin Gaethje in to do the same thing, I don't think that would be fair either. I want to see Islam fight the best 155ers possible. In my opinion, Justin Gaethje is a more compelling matchup for him to take on next, and a full camp Justin Gaethje is a lot to deal with. I personally would certainly have Islam the champion as the favorite in that one, and I could see him getting it finished just like Khabib got Justin Gaethje finished. But for me, that one just seems far more exciting. And at this point, I don't want to see Islam Makhachev wind up like Volkanovski, where it's like they're trying to squeeze another Holloway fight in with Volkanovski. He's like, all right, I beat the guy twice. Like, I guess I'll do it again. But it got to a point where it just got a little bit dull. And as a fight fan, I want to see some parity. I want to see something new happening. And Justin Gaethje seems like he's evolved since that Khabib loss for the title. And I think that would feel like good revenge for him. Even though it's not Khabib, it's his best friend and brother, Islam.
Yeah, and, I don't want to take anything away from Charles because Charles got right back on the horse and knocked out Beneil Dariush.
Right.
He did exactly what you're supposed to do after a loss, come back and get an emphatic finish. And he certainly could. There's a case to be made that Oliveira is the number one contender. He obviously beat Justin Gaethje, so there's that there. But at the same time, styles make fights. And I think the fact that Islam submitted Charles Oliveira really kind of demonstrates where the level is between the two, because Charles Oliveira is the submission guy, right? He's got the most finishes in UFC history, but way more than that. Disproportionately, the majority of his finishes are by submission, and that's what the consensus was. I don't think a lot of people thought that Islam was going to go out there and throw caution to the wind and just bang with Charles, and Charles was going to knock him out. I think most people thought that Charles could be a threat from the bottom. He could wrestle up. There could be some scrambles, and maybe he could do something that would put Islam in danger, and he could submit him. But that did not happen. Just the opposite happened. Islam submitted Charles. And when you submit the submission ace, and you do it in emphatic fashion and you dominate the whole fight, it's hard to really get up for a rematch. A rematch to me is like, man, this guy got caught, but he was really doing well beforehand. Or it was a super close fight and two judges had it one way and another judge had it another. Those are the things where you really kind of clamor for a rematch. But with regards to Makhachev Charles, when that was over, I had kind of like closed the book on that. We know who's the better of the two fighters. And then when they wanted to thrust him back in there, I was a little bit hesitant to really get on board and get excited with the fight. Arman Tsarukyan is another one. He lost to Islam when he was only 22 years old. He's obviously a lot better now than he was back then. He was literally in the earliest infancy of his professional MMA career when he fought Islam Makhachev for the first time. And the way he looked against Beneil Dariush does make him a real threat to anybody in the division, including Makhachev. Obviously, Makhachev would be the favorite in any of those fights, and I think rightfully so. But Arman's got time. Arman's only 27 years old.
Right.
Justin Gaethje is kind of putting everything together right now. He's still that same Justin that we love. He's still super exciting. He's still putting on 50K, 100K bonus type of performances, but he's a little bit more reserved. He's a little bit more polished. Trevor Whitman has his striking really good, and I am very compelled to see Islam versus Gaethje, and I'd love to see it in March because I'd hate for the Islam fight to get moved to after Ramadan because,
Right.
All of his title fights so far have been, rematches and against Volkanovski, who's a 145er. So I would hate to see him do his first real title defense as, in May or June or even July of next year. I think getting him in there in March, especially since he took no damage against Volk, is the smart move.
Yeah, and you have to listen to the champion. What the champ wants, he should get every now and again.
Yeah.
And Islam will fight anybody that comes up and says that they're, the one to beat him. And as long as they have the body of work to prove it and they kind of go off the merit system, they're willing to let anybody get their shot. And I just feel like Justin Gaethje is the rightful guy. When they announced that Charles Oliveira was going to get that rematch, the water was lukewarm.
Yeah.
Nobody was really clamoring for that. And then on 10 or 12 days notice, whatever it is, Volkanovski gets injected, and it felt like all new life was brought into this fight. And everybody knew, like, all right, the deck is stacked against Volkanovski, but he's a real dog for taking it on 12 days notice. And while he's not going to be able to be the guy that he was when he had a full camp for Volkanovski, this is still more compelling to us because of their first fight. And,
Yeah.
you saw him go toe-to-toe with Islam Makhachev the entire fight. And a lot of people saw it going Volkanovski's way. I personally had it going Islam's way, but either way, it was way more compelling than Charles Oliveira, and that's why people were excited for it. I personally think that Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan would be a lot of fun, and Charles Oliveira is one of those guys who's always going to be at the top of a division. Regardless of how long he fights, he's always somebody that matters. But he also doesn't seem like he's really in that big of a rush to get back to a title shot, especially if Islam's the one with the belt. And that's why I think it'd be really cool to see him go in there with a Gamrot or go in there with an Arman Tsarukyan. You have to remember there's not that many names at the top of 155, and we got to start to pair them up with each other. And at this point, Gaethje and Oliveira, they fought each other, and then Michael Chandler and Gaethje fought each other. So there's not that many matchups going on. A couple people have even, taken themselves out of the fight, or at least the business, and it's Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. They're kind of just waiting to do their own thing. So that's even two less names that aren't really in the talks of a title. And that's why I feel like Justin Gaethje just deserves that shot. Of course, we got Gamrot and Tsarukyan on the way up, but like you said, they're young. They've got many years to develop, and I don't think we should take our top contenders, especially Tsarukyan, and throw him into a title shot just yet. Because while I think he's better than he was when he fought Islam the first time and it was a competitive fight then, Islam's a whole different monster now, and if he suffers 2 losses to Islam Makhachev before he ever gets to the age of 30 years old, he might find himself having a really hard time getting that third fight against Islam Makhachev. I mean, to get a third fight like Max Holloway did against Volkanovski is very hard when you lost the first 2. It's almost impossible, realistically.
You got to be an all-time great like Max to even consider getting something like that.
Yeah, and the UFC doesn't like to do that type of stuff. They like fresh blood, and like I said, Islam Makhachev deserves to be a champion and feel like a champion. Call some shots every now and again. If he's beating everybody they're throwing in front of him, it's kind of cool for him to aim his cannons at somebody and shoot in that direction. And I think that the Team Khabib, that whole entire camp, they really respect Justin Gaethje. And I know some of them have the same management. Ali Abdelaziz kind of runs a lot of their careers, but they know Justin Gaethje's a real dog. And if you remember the Khabib finish over him, he had an armbar and he decided he was going to switch to a choke because Justin's not the type of guy that's going to tap or quit early. He's going to let you break his arm, and Khabib is a good guy. He's a stand-up guy. He didn't want to do that. Islam's the same way, but they respect the dog that's in Justin Gaethje, and that's why I think they want to give him another shot. It's an honest man's approach at defending your title because a lot of people want the easiest matchups possible. In my opinion, as 155 sits right now, especially after the way Justin Gaethje looked in his last couple fights, he's the rightful number 1 contender.
Yeah, that was interesting. He switched to the triangle, Khabib did, because he didn't want to break Justin's arm in front of his parents.
Legendary.
It shows you what kind of guy he is. But I like your matchmaking. Let's get Justin in there versus Islam, and let's put Charles versus Arman, and the winner of Charles versus Arman fights Islam in Abu Dhabi in October. I think that would be a perfect set of matchmaking.